I discovered that the Sunny Pines HOA was planning to build 76 luxury homes on my inherited farmland, but when I uncovered my grandfather's original property surveys, their entire development suddenly turned out to be my legal territory. You should have seen their faces when I presented the proof at their own community meeting. It was the very definition of priceless. I never dreamed I would have to fight to keep land that was already mine, yet that's exactly the situation I found myself in. When my grandpa Joe passed away last spring, leaving me his 200-acre farm just outside Green Creek, I had no idea the chaos I was walking into. It all kicked off on a Tuesday at 6 in the morning. I was half asleep when my phone went off, the caller ID showing Mrs. Thompson, Grandpa's neighbor for more than 4 decades. Her voice shook, a combination of rage and worry. "They're building houses on your land," she announced in a breathless rush. "What do you mean building?" I asked, still groggy. "Some big yellow machines rolled in yesterday, started digging up the east fields. They posted signs about Sunny Pines East claiming they're putting up over 70 fancy homes. Come quick." At first I desperately wanted to believe there must be a mix-up, maybe a construction crew that had gone a bit off the official boundary. But Mrs. Thompson never exaggerated, so I grabbed some clothes, hopped in my car, and made the 5-hour drive to Green Creek at borderline illegal speeds. Turning onto Grandpa's dirt driveway, I felt as if I'd stepped into a parallel dimension. Instead of the peaceful farmland I remembered, all I saw were swirling dust clouds and bulldozers churning away at the soil Grandpa used to cultivate. I parked near a gentle rise that overlooked the eastern fields, stepping out to witness something that turned my stomach. Multiple excavators and dozers plowed into the ground where Grandpa grew his best corn and soybeans. There was even a big flashy sign right off the main access road: "Future home of Sunny Pines East, 76 luxury homes, starting at $450,000. Strolling over in a state of shock, I spotted a woman standing a few yards away from the main bustle, crisp outfit, perfect hair, as if the dust didn't dare cling to her. She peered down at her clipboard, looking supremely uninterested in everything around her. When I reached her, she lifted her head in a polite but patronizing greeting. "Hello there," she said, a forced smile curving her lips. "Can I help you? I'm Diane Reynolds, president of the Sunny Pines Homeowners Association. That farm you're digging up belongs to my grandfather," I told her, struggling to keep my voice calm. "He passed away, but he never sold you this land." Her smile became even more practiced. "There must be some confusion. Sunny Pines Development purchased this parcel about a year ago. We have all required permits. Perhaps your grandfather didn't tell you. I knew Grandpa Joe would never have sold an inch of his cherished property." "I want to see those documents," I demanded, trying to mask the anger pulsing in my veins. She offered me a sleek business card. "Feel free to contact our legal counsel. In the meantime, we're on a tight schedule and can't afford delays." Then, without another glance, she turned away, already making a phone call as if I didn't exist. I stared in disbelief at the bulldozers, now carving trenches through the farmland. With no immediate way to stop them, I drove on to the farmhouse, mind buzzing with questions. Mrs. Thompson waited on the porch, worried but relieved I'd arrived. She poured me a glass of iced tea and explained how workers showed up months ago with measuring tools, how Grandpa confronted them, but suddenly fell ill. "He kept swearing they had no claim," she said. "But then his health got too bad for him to fight." "I'm so sorry." The next place to look was Grandpa's cluttered home office. I hadn't touched it since the funeral. Stacks of ledgers, diaries, farm almanacs, all meticulously kept. It was well past midnight when I stumbled across it, a hidden space under a loose floorboard, containing a metal box. Inside that box I found the farm's original deed, several old surveys from various decades, a handwritten note from Grandpa addressed to me. My hands shook as I read the note. Grandpa wrote about how developers had hounded him for years, pressuring him to sell. He never signed a thing but suspected they might try forging papers or bribing county officials to alter the boundaries. His final warning: compare the 1910 survey to what the county claims now. That's how they'll trick everyone. A wave of emotion hit me, partly grief, partly anger. Checking Grandpa's documents, I saw that the farmland extended about 80 acres beyond the 200 acres the county recognized. That chunk was precisely where Sunny Pines had moved in. I barely slept. The following morning, I sped into town to meet with Walter Franklin, the only property lawyer in Green Creek who specialized in farmland disputes. His cramped office might have been from another era, but he listened carefully as I laid out the old surveys and Grandpa's letter. After an hour on the phone with the county assessor's office, Walter confirmed there'd been a suspicious boundary adjustment some years back. The date matched one of Grandpa's hospital stays. The signature looked off, the notary stamp incomplete. This points strongly to fraud, Walter told me gravely. We can file an injunction to halt construction while we untangle this, but Sunny Pines is influential. Don't expect an easy victory. He wasn't kidding. The next day, an official injunction was granted, forbidding further building, but the bulldozers roared on regardless. Storming back to the site with a court order in hand, I forced them to shut down, though not without Diane delivering a venomous warning. You have no idea how connected I am here. You're an outsider, I can make your life miserable if you keep fighting. Sure enough, that's when the sabotage began. Code enforcement officers slapped me with outrageous violations for my porch, for the well out back, for the color of the barn. The water from my tap slowed to a trickle, with the utility claiming they needed emergency repairs. Even the local store refused to deliver supplies, citing some new policy that ironically aligned with Diane's threats. It felt like living under siege. But Grandpa hadn't just left me those old surveys. Deeper in his files I found references to a wetlands study from decades ago, proving part of the farmland was ecologically protected. I suspected Sunny Pines never bothered to get the proper approvals for that. If I could prove they were wiping out wetlands, it'd not only strengthen our case but draw state and maybe even federal authorities into the fray. Meanwhile, Miss Thompson introduced me to neighbors from the older Sunny Pines section, who'd been bullied by Diane's HOA for years, forced to repaint houses, remove gardens or pay crushing fines. Many had eventually sold their properties at suspiciously low prices, apparently to some LLC that Diane controlled. A break in the gloom came when a timid man named Gerald arrived at the farmhouse one evening with a USB drive. "I'm the HOA treasurer," he whispered, eyes darting around as if expecting watchers. "What they're doing isn't right. Here's the real financial records. It's worse than you think." He turned on his heel and left, leaving me with a flash drive that painted a picture of brazen corruption, funds diverted to shady accounts, artificially inflated fees, and hush payments to certain local officials. The entire operation, from forging boundaries to defrauding the community, was laid out in black and white. That's when I arranged a community meeting at the local high school auditorium, ironically, the best place to fit everyone. Diane, confident as ever, planned to announce that any dispute over the farmland was just a technical error they'd resolve. Except this time, I arrived armed with Grandpa's documents, the wetlands report, the real financial records, and a willingness to let everyone see the truth. The place was packed, anxious homeowners, new buyers who put deposits on the future lots, older folks who'd been living with Sunny Pines' heavy-handed fines for years. Diane tried to start with a polished speech. "Sunny Pines East is the best thing for Green Creek," she declared. "We're addressing a minor boundary discrepancy, but folks, you have nothing to worry about." That's when I stepped forward, overcame her attempts to cut me off, and showed the crowd the original farm boundary lines. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as I explained how official records had apparently been manipulated. Then I dropped the bombshell: "The wetlands you're bulldozing are under strict environmental protection, and you never obtained the required permits. Also, these financial statements," I waved a thick sheaf of papers, "indicate your HOA has been siphoning funds for personal use." Diane's controlled expression cracked. Residents began shouting questions, outraged and fearful. One older couple said they'd paid thousands in HOA fines with no explanation. A local reporter, invited by some of the neighbors, stood up to confirm their investigation was leading down the same path. Diane tried to interrupt, yelling that this was all slander, but the tide had turned. The homeowners demanded transparency, and the evidence was too overwhelming for spin. Within days, a state environmental official arrived in Green Creek to investigate. They found bulldozers had destroyed part of a protected wetland. Sunny Pines faced immediate cease and desist orders, plus potential fines in the millions. The local bank withdrew their financing once it saw the land was contested, and the entire project came crashing down. Diane Reynolds, once so smug about her City Hall connections, discovered no one wanted to burn with her for forging legal boundaries and tampering with protected ecosystems. She tried last-minute deals, offering me hush money, offering to rename the neighborhood after Grandpa if I'd just back down. I refused. This was never about raking in cash, it was about restoring Grandpa Joe's legacy and ensuring the farmland stayed farmland or at least lawfully developed in ways he would have approved. With her power base gone, and the HOA board resigning en masse, Diane ended up facing charges of conspiracy to commit fraud. The old portion of Sunny Pines that actually sat on my rightful land ended up being transferred legally. Families already living there got a chance to stay, but under a new and honest set of community guidelines. The wetlands are now a conservation area. As for me, I spend more time in Green Creek these days. The farmland is safe. We turned part of the old barn into a small visitor center, with photos of Grandpa Joe and an exhibit explaining how we protected the wetland area he cherished so much. Surprisingly, some folks who once followed Diane's oppressive rules became close friends once they realized how she'd exploited them too. The sense of relief is tangible. People can paint their doors any color without fear, plant gardens without monstrous fines, and walk the farmland trails that are open to respectful neighbors. Every now and then, I recall Diane's stunned face when I revealed those original surveys she never suspected existed. She tried to play her final card, acting as though she alone ran Green Creek, but in the end truth won. Thanks to my grandfather's foresight, no one would lose the land they lawfully owned, while the illegally claimed farmland was restored to my family. A tapestry of farmland, wetlands, and a newly reformed neighborhood stands as a memorial to my grandfather's determination. And if you enjoyed reading how I outmaneuvered a dishonest HOA, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes a single dusty box of old documents can overturn an entire scheme, and sometimes, defending what's rightfully yours, helps free an entire community from petty tyranny. Whether it's farmland in Green Creek, or another small-town saga, never doubt the power of real evidence, real neighbors banding together, and a legacy too strong to be stolen.